With a million podcasts out there, we're grateful you chose toilets to titles. We give fantasy football advice to get your crap team to the finals. From Nate's cousin Eddie persona and his unapologetic love for Chubb and Justin's hatred for Chris Ballard, our show is as good as a belly rub. Mark is the best of the NFC West, putting down Penguin Pete with his love for the Rams. Grab a whiskey or a beer, we're glad you're here. Welcome to the family, but plan for gibberish and rambling. We have recent news and games of the week. We talk PPR and weekly streams. Start 'em and sit 'em, keep 'em or quit 'em. Hit the like and sub buttons for the fellas. Got any suggestions? Just tell us. From Mitch, has any persona?
All right, welcome back to Toyless Titles. My name is Justin Stevens, and we are back for episode 263, fantasy football season, the 2024 fantasy football season. A look back at what we got right and what we got wrong when it comes to our early season predictions in a roundabout way. But before we get to that, I got my man Mark. Mark, what do you think, Mark, over there at MT Simon on X? What do you think of that music? What do you think it was?
Man, I was between either show tunes or like jingles. One of the two.
I do know that I had a jingles one in there somewhere. Show tunes I don't think I thought of at the time, but that would have been nice. No, this was supposed to be circus music.
Circus music. Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So I don't think they hit it on the head, but I think that the hammer was at least close to the nail. They missed a little. Maybe
clowns.
What's that?
And it brought in the clowns.
Yeah, definitely brought in the clowns as the hammer hit our thumb. All right. Yeah, so that's that. Let's move on from the music. But anyway, so we had a fun time before the season started, you and Nate and myself, and we drafted divisional drafts. And the way we set that up, for those of you that didn't catch those episodes, we took, like, say, for instance, and I'll just go ahead and pull it up so we can see it here, but we took, say, the AFC and NFC East, and we drafted only players that were in the AFC and NFC East. Hey, Coach, good to see you, man. Funny you should chime in. You should I'll send you a text later. There's some stuff going down. But yeah, I'll shoot you a text here in a little bit when I get off the phone. I'm going to be headed out to the airport to pick up my son. He was in New Mexico all week this past week, so he's flying back tonight. So I'll be, after we get off here, I'll be headed out to pick him up. But yeah, miss you, Coach. I'll text you in a little bit. But so we drafted only players that were in the AFC and NFC East. And I didn't put them down in the order that we drafted them. I put them in order of their position, so it'd be easier for me to look at their scores as the season went along. And we did a little best ball type scoring challenge here with what we drafted. Now, I did put the players in the order that they were drafted from their position. So, like, as you can see, Nate drafted Josh Allen before he drafted Aaron Rodgers. Makes sense. We each put a quick $20 bet on each one of these. So essentially, if you won a division, you won $40, $20 from each of the other two guys. So keep that in mind as we go through this. But the first divisions here. So Nate went with Josh Allen, Aaron Rodgers. We'll look at the quarterback position first. I took Dak and Tua. And then Marky went with the two best quarterbacks in this division, or in these divisions, maybe outside of Josh Allen, of course. But Jalen Hurts and Jaden Daniels, you took two really good quarterbacks there. Those were the players that were drafted between those two divisions. So between those two divisions, who did we not have drafted? We didn't have Drake May drafted. Let's see. All the other AFC East were taken. NFC East, we had Dak and Hurts and Daniels. So that means we only had who was the one that wasn't drafted. We got the Commanders, we got the Cowboys, and we've got the Eagles. So it would have been the Giants. So Daniel Jones, RIP, was not drafted. So it looks like we got that one right. We got that. We got those divisions right. If you want to look at it that way. But yeah, if we look down the line here, Nate's lineup: Josh Allen, Aaron Rodgers. He went with Achane, probably pretty early. Austin Eckler, Zeke Elliott was his number 3, and I believe we made fun of him at the time, and rightfully so. Tyreek Hill, AJ Brown, Terry McLaurin, even Keon Coleman, for being a rookie, being his wide receiver 4, was a pretty solid pick there. Aside from the 5 zeros in a row there, but one of them was a bye week. The yellow is the bye week. But other than that stretch there where he was hurt, Mike Williams as a number 5, Dalton Kincaid, Dallas Goedert. So he did pretty well overall. I mean, really, Mike, I can't even call them a miss. If it was your wide receiver 4 and 5 and your RB3, I don't think we can count those as a miss. Maybe the closest would be Austin Eckler. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, Austin Eckler. I mean, still, that was a fine pick. I mean, maybe going with Brian Thomas over him was probably the way to go. But yeah, like you're saying, for the 5th receiver with Mike Williams, I don't know if you can really call that a miss.
You mean Brian Robinson, right?
What did I say, Thomas? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. But yeah,
I mean, it
was the 5th. I mean, once you get down there, you start looking at the rest of our rosters. I mean,
he definitely went wide receiver heavy, probably early on. Took Achane probably early, and Josh Allen early. So by the time he got to those running backs, it was probably a later pick. Dallas Goedert, though, he would have had to have gotten him late. I think that was a sneaky good pick, even though he ended up being hurt. If you look at his points per game, he ended up as like the tight end 6 overall in the season in points per game. So that was a pretty solid pick. If he would have stayed healthy, that could have really rocked us. But no, overall, it was a pretty good draft for him. For my team, I was happy with this one, leaving the draft that we had. Dak Prescott really hurt me, getting hurt halfway through the season. When your QB1 and a super flex goes down, that's never good. And then Tua also went down early in the season. So pretty much for practically all intents and purposes, the entire season, I had one quarterback in this division. So that was pretty rough. Breece Hall was a bit of a letdown for where you had to draft him at in drafts. He probably performed more as a round 2, late round 2 running back, and you were taking him as a top 3 pick in fantasy drafts. And I mean, maybe not you, but me, obviously, clearly. That was a bit of a letdown for where you drafted him. James Cook, I was happy with that one. Our man Wicked was super high on him all offseason, was tooting his horn, and I was a little bit worried about the rookie coming in, but when you find guys that you trust in this industry, you just trust these guys. And Wicked is a guy that I trust when it comes to young guys coming into the league, because he's really good with college football knowledge. And so I trusted that, went with that, and it paid off. And when I say, obviously, James Cook wasn't the rookie. It was the rookie coming in I was worried about. He said, don't worry about him. Take James Cook, and that's what I did. Devin Singletary, obviously, not the best pick, but again, RB3. When we get this deep, what you gonna do, right? My wide receivers, I thought they were solid. I was happy with CD. He was solid. I was happy with Garrett Wilson. He was solid. Devonta Smith was solid, with a couple of injuries through the season. Demario Douglas was a guy I thought was going to hit big, and he had spots. He had games, but he didn't hit super big. So, and again, I think that's the system. I think that could change with another season with Drake May there. Wan'Dale Robinson was a kind of a surprise. I did not think he would perform as well as he did as my wide receiver 5. So that one really helped. I had Jake Ferguson, who he had his ups and downs, and that kind it's kind of a lot more down than it was up whenever Dak went out. So that one hurt me twice. That one kind of hurt me twofold. I thought it was going to hurt me with CD as well, but CD still had some really huge games. And I think that's just because he's a rare talent. He's one of those guys that's going to be quarterback proof his entire career. So that's nice. It's nice to always that's the kind of guy you want to go high on in your drafts if you're going to take a wide receiver early. You don't want to go with super talented guys that have always had great quarterbacks and then all of a sudden they don't. Like, you want to wait until you've seen them do it with multiple quarterbacks before you try to take them that high, unless they obviously still have a super good quarterback. And then Zach Ertz, I was happy with that one late, and it paid off. In the end, it didn't really matter because Nate still beat me by 0.76. So 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12 players on a team per team. And all season long, best ball format beats me by 0.76. You got to be kidding me. Like, I looked everywhere I could to try to double check numbers. I really wanted to go in and fudge some numbers. I'm not gonna lie to you, because I was just like, my team is obviously better, but I had one quarterback all season. You take away that huge injury issue with my two quarterbacks, I would have blown this one out of the water. But injuries are a part of the game. It is what it is. Couldn't fudge the numbers. Mark, we talked about your two good quarterbacks. Tell us about the rest of your team.
Yeah, so obviously I went quarterbacks early here with Jalen Hurts. And I think this was the order in which we picked as well, I think. Nate,
that might
be, because I was looking at the other ones and they switch up like the order there.
Oh, yep. Yeah,
So
you're right. You're right.
That's where we went. And, I'm pretty sure, if I remember correctly, I went back-to-back quarterbacks. And then after that, I was thinking of loading up on running backs and kind of playing wide receiver by ear. And that wasn't the way to go with these two divisions, because there's about, let's see. Yeah, you guys have probably the 6 solid receivers in these two divisions, and then from there it's a crapshoot. When it comes to these, it's avoiding the landmines. So I went strong quarterback and running back, and when you do that, you can't afford to have a landmine in either one of those spots. And I had that with Mostert. He got a total of 70 points on the whole season. So when you add that into my next best receiver option being Malik Neighbors, who I didn't even take as my number one receiver. Jalen Waddle was a mess. I was way wrong on Curtis Samuel. Going into the season, I thought Curtis Samuel was going to have a great season as the slot guy and in the middle with Josh Allen, but he really didn't do anything at all the whole season. And then I thought Dotson had a chance to break out with Washington, and he got traded to the Eagles, which put him behind both Brown and Devontae. So, yeah. And then I think my last two picks were probably my tight ends, or pretty close to my last two picks. And
probably
for where I got them, I don't think I did that bad. Hunter Henry had 145 points, and Tyler Conklin had 112. But, there's just way too many landmines in there to have a chance. But it was like we were talking before the show. If I would have told you I had Jalen Hurts, Jaden Daniels, and Saquon Barkley, you would say there's no chance in hell you're losing. Well, yeah, pair them with those scrubs, you can. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and for what it's worth, you weren't wrong about Johan Dotson. You just had to wait until the Super Bowl to get it.
Right.
See, we had the AFC and NFC South next. And I think you're right. I think this was the order we drafted them in, because after I had Nate had the first pick, and then I had the first pick. We got to the third. After that happened, you kind of bitched about it, and then I let you have the third first overall pick just because I didn't want to randomize it and not have you have the first pick. So I do remember that. You remember that conversation?
That was a perfect time to give me the first overall pick too. For that.
Right. I thought it made sense.
Yeah.
So, all right. So the AFC and NFC South. This is my Colts division, and I waited on quarterback because I knew that there were some quarterbacks there that I liked late. I was really high on Trevor Lawrence. I thought that with the emergence of Brian Thomas into that offense, I just thought that that was going to really help that running game, and ETN and Bigsby were going to be able to run all over people, and that was going to help open up the passing game. And that's what Trevor Lawrence needs. He's a good quarterback. He's not a great quarterback. He needs a good passing game. He needs a good offensive line to help make him successful. And I thought they were going to get that. Um, but unfortunately, they did not. And he got hurt before week 10, had a lot of zeros through there. He came back for like, I don't know, less than a quarter maybe in week 13 and got hurt again. And it was like, all right. So this guy completely cooked me in this division. But Baker Mayfield bailed me out. At least in this one, I feel like I had, a decent amount of quarterback play, especially compared to the last division. And Baker Mayfield, getting him late, like I know I did, because if you look at the rest of my team, I definitely waited on this position at least longer than I would in most super flex leagues. So waited on them. See, I got Bijan Robinson, who I'm sure I took early on, maybe even first round. I got Alvin Kamara, and I was getting Alvin Kamara later in most drafts. I got him as late as early third round in a draft. So, and I'm not talking about this particular draft, but just in general before the season starts. So I feel like that's a win. He had a great season. It wasn't, Alvin Kamara of the past level season, but he had a very consistent, really good season. Man, you can look at his score across the board here. Only one game that wasn't double digits before he got hurt and started sitting at the end of the season, week 16 and 17. So only one game that wasn't in double digits. That's pretty solid for an RB2. And then Tyjae Spears, I missed. I whiffed. I thought that he was going to be what he was at the end of the season, but I thought he was going to be that all season. And he simply wasn't. When he was healthy, he was losing way too many touches to Pollard. Pollard was playing a lot better than I was giving him credit for going into that offense. I thought that they were going to shift it much more into a very pass-heavy offense, and to an extent they did, but I thought that was going to bode more for Spears than it did Pollard. I was wrong when they were both out there, but the end of the season they were both out there, and it was Spears, and I feel like that's kind of the direction I thought I was going to see all season, but wasn't quite enough. I don't think. I don't remember the finals of this one. It wasn't quite enough, as you beat me by 20 points. Still a super close one considering how many players we have in the game here. But Mike Evans, Nico Collins, and those were obviously my only two wide receivers. And Nico was hurt half the season. But yeah, Christian Kirk, huge letdown, and obviously that's from the injury. He had a decent few games there at the beginning of the season, but I was expecting big things from Christian Kirk. Obviously, I mean, I drafted Trevor Lawrence, and I thought we were going to see a lot there. Deontay Johnson was a letdown. Rashid Shaheed was a great fifth option there until he got hurt. I had a lot of injuries on this team. Kyle Pitts. Wasn't expecting anything huge. Honestly, I think I got a little bit more out of him than I probably thought I was going to this season. So, I mean, I'm not completely hurt by that one. And then, of course, my big tight end too, the big, huge man that is he's like a redwood tree out there when he's playing, but he didn't play all season because he got hurt 2 days. 2 days after we did this draft, he got hurt and he was done for the year. So that was Jelani Woods from the Colts, and that was just because at that point I felt like I needed to have a Colt on the team, and he was my last round pick. I do remember that, and I thought he had some touchdown upside if he would have been healthy, but here we are. See, Nate. He went to C.J. Stroud. So who are the quarterbacks not taken in this one? We've got C.J. Stroud and Trevor Lawrence and Anthony Richardson, Will Levis. So all the AFC guys were taken. So for the NFC South, we've got Kirk Cousins and Baker Mayfield. So we did not get Derek Carr, which makes sense, and we did not get Bryce Young.
Yep.
So both of those make sense. Obviously, Bryce Young ended up having a decent season, but yeah, it makes sense for where we were drafting. Kirk Cousins. Nate had those 2 huge spikes from Kirk Cousins the 2 weeks that he played. What was it? Was it the Bucks? The 2 weeks he played the Buccaneers, 42 points and 36 points.
Yeah.
It still wasn't enough for him. We beat him by about 323. Yeah. Well, 400 points pretty much. And that's because he had Travis Etienne, which was a big letdown for where you drafted him in most leagues. I don't know what he was thinking with his RB2 taking Tyler Algier. Maybe he thought there was going to be more of a split this season, but as your RB2, and it's not like he went early anywhere else. He definitely took Tyler Algier too high. And then Jonathan Brooks never really came back because when he did, he was gone again. So that one was a big letdown. But I think to his credit on Jonathan Brooks, most people thought he was going to be back by about week 5 or 6 or so, and it just never panned out. Tank Dell, I think, was a good pick. Unfortunately, not as a wide receiver 1. Michael Pittman, the inconsistencies with Anthony Richardson at quarterback are going to get you these types of scores with Michael Pittman, inconsistent numbers. So keep that in mind for next season. A whole lot of single-digit games. You don't want that from your wide receiver 2, guys. Don't fall for it next season. Don't take Michael Pittman. Anthony Richardson, they're going to run with Anthony Richardson again, and it's not going to be pretty again. Chris Godwin, obviously he got hurt. Can't take that one away. He was having a great season. That one hurt. That one hurt to see. Like he was having an incredible season, and it's an Achilles. We don't know if he's going to come back, at the same level. You might have a Marlon Mack, or you might have I was going to say Aaron Rodgers, but that one didn't turn out too well either. Darnell Mooney as his wide receiver 5. I thought that was a sneaky good pick, and it turned out to be, wide receiver 4. I think I said 5, but that turned out to be a really good pick for a wide receiver 4. DeAndre Hopkins, kind of surprised we let it slip to that point, but also we weren't expecting a trade that was going to cause him to have some better games. Still not great, but as a wide receiver 5, yeah, I would definitely take that. So not bad there. He did the sneaky move with Taysom Hill, made him his tight end, hoping he would get some quarterback points. That one huge week almost made up for all these zeros at the end of the season. So not horrible there, but Dalton Schultz obviously had a bit of a letdown season, but you also drafted him late. So in a normal league, you just dropped him after the first couple weeks, and you weren't worse for the wear because you drafted him late and redraft anyway. So that was Nate's team. Like I said, 400 points behind us. Mark, you won this division. So now that is Nate up 1 and you up 1. Tell us about your team and your thought process. Where were you at with this one?
Yeah, so actually you almost stole, or Baker Mayfield almost stole this division for you, because he was the number 1 quarterback for the majority of the season. And I was just looking at the scores, and like your quarterbacks outscored mine by almost 200 some points.
Yeah, and imagine right here, had Trevor Lawrence came back and stayed healthy and just played those last 4 games.
Yeah.
I mean, that would have been more than enough.
Yeah.
But injuries are a part of it.
Definitely. And you'll see that going through. There's a lot of zero. We were talking there's a lot of zeros on these boards throughout all the divisions. So my quarterbacks, I obviously waited here. You guys took the quarterbacks early. I ended up going with Richardson, who led the pack for me. He had an okay season, nothing great, 179 points. Will Levis, but at least he was in and out, so he got me points throughout the season. couple zeros here or there when he sat, but yeah.
A negative 4.44. That one wasn't cool.
Yeah, right.
And I say that one wasn't cool because I remember that I had no choice but to play him in a Superflex league that week. It was not cool.
Yeah, so running backs and wide receivers are really where I ended up taking this here. I had Jonathan Taylor, Joe Mixon, Rashad White, all put up more than solid seasons. My wide receivers, this is where it gets a little crazy. So my number one wide receiver was Chris Olave, who missed how many weeks? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 weeks to close the season. And then Drake London, who obviously had the quarterback mess there, he still did fine with both of them.
Yeah.
Then
considering the quarterback situation, Drake London was a big surprise for me. Like, I missed on him in the same way that you hit on him.
Yeah. Then I had Stephon Diggs, who missed even more weeks than Olave did. For to finish the season. Ridley, we just talked about Will Levis and the quarterback issues going on.
Wait. Let's not jump ahead yet. Tell the people why you were still at least half right, or more than half right, about Stephon Diggs.
Well, yeah. I mean, I did say prior to the season that Stephon Diggs is you draft him, he goes off, and then you trade him before week 7 or 8. So, I mean, if I was allowed to do that in this format, it would have worked out perfect. Ridley, yeah, not much to say. I mean, he did great for the quarterback play that they had there.
Fair.
I mean, he had a couple 20-point weeks. You can't ask for much more with all the mess that was going on there. But then
as a wide receiver 4 especially.
Yeah. And then I think here's where I won this division.
Yeah.
I got Brian Thomas, who was the number 4 overall receiver on the season, with my last wide receiver pick.
And I remember thinking at the time that you took Calvin Ridley, oh man, he really should have taken Brian Thomas. I can't believe he's still out there. And then you went Brian Thomas.
Yep. Yeah. So, I mean, tight ends were tight ends. I didn't get much. I had Evan Ingram, who missed, maybe 7 weeks on the season. And then Kate Otten, who had a great, middle of the season while Evans was out, and then went back to nothing there in the middle.
Now, for what it's worth, I want to talk about Evan Ingram for a quick second. Evan Ingram still had a really good season if you consider the fact that he did have those injuries where he missed 4 games at the start of the season and the 3 games at the tail end of the season. He had only 1, 2, 3 games that were single digits, because I'm not counting week 1 where he got hurt on the first drive of the game. So he only had 3 games where he was single digits. For a tight end that you were able to get super late in drafts, that is a hell of a boost for your fantasy teams. And the reason I'm saying this is because at least I remember, at least in these first 4 weeks, 3 of those first 4 weeks, Britton Strange came in and had double-digit weeks in 3 of those 4 weeks. So it is a system thing. And we know it's not just Evan Ingram, because we saw him for years with other quarterbacks in New York, and he never really fully developed into a guy that could be a top-tier, top-notch guy until he got to Jacksonville. And maybe it's a system thing. Maybe it's a Trevor Lawrence thing, because if you notice, those games where he did get single digits were at the end of the season when Trevor Lawrence wasn't playing. So maybe that has more to do with it. Maybe Trevor Lawrence just likes to utilize his tight ends, and that's why Britton Strange also did so well. Regardless, Trevor Lawrence is likely going to be the quarterback for the Jaguars next season. I know there's been talks, trade rumors. He wants to stay. If he ends up staying there, Evan Ingram needs to be drafted higher than he was. I don't care about the fact that he didn't finish at the end of the season as high as he did. Points per game wise, he did. And in the games that he played, he did very well for you. So if you're a guy that doesn't take a tight end, or a person that doesn't take a tight end early on in drafts, you want to look for Evan Ingram in those rounds 5, 6, 7 range. so that you can get him before the people that think that they're going to get him in those rounds 7, 8, 9 range. Just throwing that out there. And then you also got a big hit with K. Dotton for a large part of this season as well.
Yeah. Couple more things I just wanted to touch on. One of the things I did have right going into this was I was very low on ETN. And that actually worked out this season. I just felt like he was a volume-based running back, and he was showing over the past couple seasons or the last season, like he finished up top by stats, but it was purely volume. So if he was gonna lose any of that, he was gonna drop down. A couple things we all missed on Chuba Hubbard and Bucky Irvin. Both had great seasons, not on any of our rosters. I was trying to see if there's anybody else. Can you think of anybody else that probably should have been on our teams that we didn't have? I don't think so, right?
No, nothing that stands out that's glaring anyway.
Yeah, I mean, we even had Mooney. Mooney had a more than solid season. Nate had him.
I mean, Alec Pierce had a few games here and there, but he also had several zeros.
Yeah.
Yeah, nothing that really stands out.
Yeah,
I
so
feel like we
running
can call it
back.
a with.
Yeah, sure.
All right. Well, next we have the AFC NFC West. This was your division. This was your Rams division. And you did have the first overall pick in this division, which may have been what ended up haunting you here. But yeah, this is the division I won, by the way. So I did win it, and not only did I win it, I won it in style. This is the first one where it was won by at least a decent chunk of points. I won by 50 over Nate, which isn't a super large amount either when we're talking 12 players. Actually, now that I think about it, 50 points still isn't that much, but yeah, man, your strategy with your 101 there. Tell us about that guy.
Yeah, the draft seeding isn't rigged or anything. Let's finally give Mark a first round pick. Let's force him to take a 49er when he's a Rams fan. And on top of that, let's give him a 49er who's not going to play the whole damn season. Yay, Christian McCaffrey. Woo! I also had the 101 in draft night out and took Christian McCaffrey, and I can bet you can guess how that team finished. Not that good. Yeah. So, but let's keep going through it. Not only did I have Christian McCaffrey, who didn't play the entire season, I drafted Pacheco, who got injured and missed more than half of the season. And then I had my biggest whiff of my fantasy predictions on the whole season was Zamir White. I thought he was going to be good. You were right. You said, nope, stay away from him. Should have stayed away from him.
Yeah, but I you know what? I was right, but look who I thought was going to be more likely to take over. So
yeah.
I was right because I did say that Dylan Lobb and Madison were both going to do better than White. I just chose. I was wrong about Dylan Lobb.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah. I skipped over quarterbacks. My quarterbacks were fine. Stafford had a more than solid season. Geno Smith, not great, but not bad.
So now this was one bad season out of Smith, and that was with a OC that they've already fired and moved on from. Unfortunately, the new OC isn't a guy that really spices things up in the passing game either. But I'm not expecting a huge jump back for Geno Smith, especially being another year older. I think maybe we've seen the best of Geno Smith at this point.
Yeah, I mean, when was the year? When did that coach leave? The one that's
that was just 2 years ago. Yeah, that was just 2 years ago.
2 years ago. So, I mean, I think it was more the coach getting it out of Geno than it was Geno actually being Geno. So, yeah, I'm with you.
Little known fact, by the way, Geno Smith was drafted in 1942. So, yeah, he's older than people remember because he spent so many decades as a backup in the
Yeah.
NFL. So don't let the couple good seasons that he had with good play calling and good offensive coordinators fool you. He's still Geno Smith, guys.
All right. So receivers, I'm going to skip down a couple because I just want to keep this trend of all zeros going across the board. Marquise Brown, injured before the season, didn't play until week 16. Another great one. Yay.
Mm-hmm.
Cooper Kupp, he missed weeks 3 through 7. Yay. Harrison was fine. I think preseason everybody was super hyped on him, and you kind of told people to pump the brakes a little bit. Not that he wouldn't have a good season, but not to expect him to be a wide receiver 1 right out of the gate. And
yeah, he was going in like the first and second round in almost every draft I was in, and I was like, this is too high for a rookie. But to be fair, I also said the same thing about Malik Neighbors, and I was wrong about that one. So it's just rookie wide receivers in general typically don't have great wide receiver 1 seasons. So yeah, I can't do it. And I'm okay with being wrong on Malik Neighbors in this situation, knowing that over the course of my fantasy career, I'm almost always right in pumping the brakes on rookie wide receivers. I'm okay with missing one.
And to be fair to Harrison, like he had some really big games. It was weird with Arizona because they came out very hot and they hit a cliff and fell completely off of it about mid-season. I don't know what caused it, but you can see that's where he really took a huge dip. Josh Palmer,
not bad for a wide receiver 4.
Wide receiver 4. JSN. Man, I was striking with my wide receiver 5s here, but outside of that, and then I think I did take both these guys early. I had to have Trey McBride and George Kittle. So,
I mean, after you take CMC with the first pick, you kind of have room, to play. And I'm not trying to go back and knock you on CMC. Like nobody saw that coming, but you kind of feel like you have room to play. And if you're gonna try to take the 2 best tight ends, I mean, that were available. Obviously, I took Kelsey, and then nobody saw Brock Bowers the way that he ended up. But yeah, so you took 2 of the top 3 tight ends at the time. So I think that was a good move.
Yeah.
And McBride, I know he only had the 3 touchdowns, but I mean, he still had a solid PPR season. Tight end 4, I think, 5. Still had a solid tight end season.
So to me, he's kind of like one of those guys you can look at next season who has the chance to be the number 1 overall tight end, right? Because you have as much production as he had, and like you said, only 3 touchdowns. Like you got to believe there's some positive touchdown regression there. So
yeah, there's got to be. Yep, I agree. And then the underappreciated and underrespected every season George Kittle, he always outperforms his ADP. I mean, unless he has a horrible injury season, he always outperforms ADP. It's kind of crazy how he always keeps slipping. It's like everybody thinks, well, it's not going to happen this year because X, Y, and Z is happening, and then George Kittle comes and plays. So another good season for him. And again, not crazy numbers, not huge, crazy, awesome numbers the whole season, but he has these 18 and 20, 19-point spikes all season long, and then his bad games are still double digits. Like, I mean, it is what it is when you have an injury where you get 0. I don't know what happened week 13. I don't remember that. You're going to have games, but for the most part, he's going to get you double digits no matter what in a PPR format. Nate went with Mahomes and Purdy as his quarterbacks. So you go ahead and take a look at which quarterbacks weren't drafted as I go through Nate's here. But Mahomes and Purdy were taken, and they played all season, and that paid off for him. Obviously, he didn't win this division, but he still had a pretty good outing overall. He took Kyron Williams. I remember that was an early on pick. Javonte Williams, he's always been high on, and to this day, I don't understand why or how. We all find these guys that we just can't quit, and I really hope that Nate continues to draft Javonte Williams way too early in drafts, especially in leagues that I'm with him in. Kenneth Walker sounds like he's going to get picked up a lot in the passing game next season from what we're hearing coach speak early on in the offseason, which you should always take as gold. But if we listen to what the coaches are saying right now, they want to get all of the running backs more involved in the passing game. And if that's going to happen, we can look for Kenneth Walker to have a pretty big bump next season. But as his RB3, I think that was a hell of a pick there. Great season for him as an RB3 on any fantasy roster. Debo was his wide receiver 1. He had some injury issues, some diva issues, some typical wide receiver issues, and a lot of down games the second half of the season. Devontae Adams was injured-ish for a few games with the Raiders before they traded him, and he went on to have a pretty solid end of the season with the Jets. It'll be interesting to see if Devontae Adams stays with the Jets. We're hearing rumors that he may not be, and that also makes sense. Let's see, DK Metcalf. I was not as high on him as most people, and he kind of still performed a little bit better than I expected. He was very inconsistent. Getting you double digits and even 20 points in a few games, almost 30 points in week 2, which after week 2 and 3, I thought, you know what, I was wrong about this guy. I'm going to be eating crow all season. But then he came back down to earth. He still had a couple spike games, but he's way too inconsistent, and especially in that offense. But as a wide receiver 3, I don't hate it. It was a good wide receiver 3 pick. But unfortunately, in most typical fantasy drafts, that dude's being taken as a wide receiver 2, or at least this season he was. And a lot of people were higher on him thinking he was going to bounce back. But time will tell, but he's too inconsistent for me. Speaking of inconsistencies, you got Xavier Worthy, who admittedly had a much better season than I anticipated. I was completely wrong. Xavier Worthy, I know you were a little bit higher on him, so I'll let you talk about Xavier Worthy, but I thought that he was going to be big play only kind of guy. It turns out, though, that he has a lot more big plays in him than I thought he did.
Yeah, so I think it was Jerry you were talking about just today or the other day about Worthy in the Discord chat. Yeah, I don't know if I totally agree with him being a one-trick pony. Towards the end of the season, he was he had a lot of receptions, 8, 7, 6, 5, 5 over the past 5-6 weeks. But I do agree with you with Rashid Rice coming back that his volume is going to go down, which could hurt him significantly.
Unless he gets suspended. Now, if Rashid Rice gets that suspension, then we could still see enough volume for Worthy. But the one thing I'll say about all those receptions, though, if you watch the games and you pay attention to the targets, they were all in open space. They were like quick screens, really quick slants. They were those little short push passes where Mahomes is in the shotgun and Xavier Worthy's cutting across and he just, shovels it in front of him 2 feet to Worthy. And it's all trying to get him open in space to take advantage of his one trick. And that's kind of what I mean by a one-trick pony. But if they're going to utilize him like that and he gets those 8 catches, those are still good fantasy points. So that's where I'm willing to admit that I was, somewhat wrong about the guy. I still think he's a one-trick pony, but sometimes I forget that really good coaches like Andy Reid and really good offensive coordinators can find ways to get those big plays in games. So sometimes you gotta trust coaches. It's just hard for me to do since I'm a Colts fan. I'm used to seeing really bad coaching my entire adult life. But some coaches like Andy Reid, you got to have a little bit of faith in them. So that's where I was wrong on Xavier Worthy. I do feel like I'm going to be drafting him a bit higher than I would have expected going into this season for sure.
Yeah. The only thing, like I said, that scares me about the volume is because, so he had all those receptions, which are great in PPR leagues, but his yardage in those weeks, the high was 79. So, I
Yeah.
mean, if you cut that volume out and you cut 2 to 3 catches a week,
Yeah.
now all of a sudden his ceiling isn't as appealing. So
Yeah.
you got to
Yeah.
be a
But
little.
of that 79, though, one of them was probably a 60-yard bomb. Like, you know what I mean? Like, if he doesn't get the big play, then you're gonna have a mediocre game. But if it's a mediocre game with 8 catches,
Yeah.
but yeah, it's
I think
it's gonna be one. You don't want him as a wide receiver 1 or 2.
No.
Let's just say that if you want to take the chance on him, make sure that you already have 2 consistent wide receivers. Then go ahead and take the chance on him.
Yeah. And honestly, if you're in a dynasty league, I would personally be looking at possibly shopping him because the ceiling is super high on him right now.
Yeah.
People are going to want to pay up to get him. And I'm not so sure what the offense looks like next year.
Yeah.
Hopkins isn't going to
Yeah.
be there. Rice is coming back. If he gets suspended, what do you think? He gets 4 games at most?
I was thinking maybe 6 just because of the fact that he ran after the hit and run. Like, that part of it makes it like a low-grade felony, and that can be, that kind of perks the ears of Roger Goodell sometimes. So I was thinking maybe 6. But then also Hollywood Brown, he's
You
back.
have Hollywood Brown back, and then I'm not convinced they don't go out and grab another veteran. Like, Cup's on the trading block. I mean, I could see the Chiefs trading for Cup.
Yeah, Devontae Adams.
Yeah, Devontae Adams. I think Devontae Adams follows wherever Rodgers ends up again, but
not if Rodgers ends up in Canada or retiring.
It's true.
I'm not sure Rodgers is going to get a call. Like, I heard rumors that he was going to be picked up by the Colts, and I'm hoping that's wrong, but it also makes sense because Chris Ballard has this thing about wanting to pick up old guys at the tail end of their career long after they're done being good at football and expecting them to come in and play good for the Colts. So maybe, but if they do, then the only thing I like about that is that's going to cause them to bench Anthony Richardson for a season, but that only prolongs the inevitable, which is then they bring Richardson back after Rodgers underperforms or finally retires, and Richardson still isn't good at football. So, like, I hope they don't take Rodgers.
I think it's Pittsburgh. If you ask me today, I think he ends up on the Steelers because I think the Steelers are going to move on from both Justin Fields and Russell Wilson. And I don't think, like, they're trying to go out. Like, there was report came out that they reached out to Jacksonville for Trevor Lawrence. There's no way Jacksonville's trading Trevor Lawrence. They're not going to get a quarterback like that via trade. So, I mean, it's going to be like Kirk Cousins or Aaron Rodgers or a Sam Darnold type. And I think they'll take the cheap route and go with Aaron Rodgers and just hope he can survive, which I think is then going to end up being dumb because unless the Steelers drastically improve their offensive line, like, he's going to get killed behind that.
Right.
So,
right.
Oh.
Yeah. Hey, Rich is in the house. What's up, buddy? Thanks for
tuning in.
Yes, sir. Speaking of Aaron Rodgers being irrelevant, the next 3 picks for Nate were Zay Jones, Tyler Higbee, and Will Dissly. I don't know if people were expecting Higbee to come back sooner or not. Higbee wasn't a guy that was on my list at all. I knew he was hurt, and I knew he was going to be out for a while. So I don't know if he just didn't know that or if I was, were there people expecting him back sooner?
Yeah, it was very up in the air before the season. They didn't know how long the injury was going to be, and I think he did end up tweaking or like re-injuring it in the rehab process, which caused him to be a lot longer. I mean, when he came back and in the playoffs, like he's a strong piece to our team. I mean, it doesn't show right there with the 8 and 2, but
Right.
I mean, he scored a touchdown. I think that 8 points was in the game I went to. He scored that touchdown against the
Well,
Jets.
that was wasn't that his very first catch back from the injury?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, but overall he had a pretty good outing. But yeah, I took this one because if you look, I don't have a whole lot of zeros compared to some of your guys' zeros with all the injuries you had. So I think that's why I won. I didn't have as many injuries. Kyler Murray and Justin Herbert, having 2 quarterbacks that played the whole season really helps in this format. I had James Conner, who again, he's another one of those players that gets underdrafted every year. He's a guy that most people seem to always think this isn't going to be his year. He's finally taken a step back. The next guy's going to take a step up, but he's always Mr. Consistency. So I'm thinking maybe next year will be the year that people finally trust that he's going to be a solid bell cow running back again, and then that'll be when he loses it. But that's just kind of how it goes in fantasy football sometimes. But I trusted him for one more year, and it paid off in this format. It paid off in a couple of my leagues. This one did not, Dylan Labe, but I also took him really late in nearly every format, including this one. If you look at my wide receivers, I promise you I took him really late in this format. And I probably just went really late on both of my last 2 running backs, and I whiffed. I totally whiffed on this guy. I mean, he literally only played like 3 games, and one of them he got -2. He had a fumble. It wasn't that was a bad call. I'm willing to admit it. Then J.K. Dobbins worked out really well for me. The end of the season, the three games out, but other than that, worked out great for me. He had a few games here where single digits, but he had some in a best ball format. Having those spike games really helps out a lot, and I knew he would have those, knowing that Harbaugh was the coach and they were going to run the ball a lot. And Harbaugh loves Dobbins. That's why he was there. So it paid off. I was just glad he stayed healthy. That was really my only concern. And he didn't even stay healthy. Like, he missed those 4 games. But for J.K. Dobbins, he stayed healthy. Puka, obviously, like I said, I went pretty early at wide receiver overall because Puka was my wide receiver 1. Even with the injury at the start of the season, that one still pays off because of the end of the season games. Ayuk did not pay off. He only gave me 1 good game all season. A whole bunch of injuries, a whole bunch of out games because of his injury. And then, just poor play at the start of the season as well. Ayuk was not the same player he's been in the past. He wasn't utilized the same either, which I think is really what bit me at the start of the season with him. Lad McConkey, great season for a rookie, but again, you notice where I took him. This is where you take those rookie wide receivers. You take them later. You take them as your wide receiver 3 if you want to take a chance on them. And he paid off. Like, it worked great as a wide receiver 3. Rashee Rice, can't believe I got him late, because even if I just got one of these quarterbacks and James Conner, that's 2, 3, 4, 5. I know I would have had to have taken Kelsey early. That's 6. Can't believe Rashee Rice in the 7th round, but also it's only 3 people drafting. But still, Rashee Rice was a guy that was super high on my list. I took him in. I always go early and heavy with running back. Rashee Rice is the only guy that I consistently took in the 2nd or 3rd round of drafts last year. And, of course, he got hurt in week 4, and he was out the whole season. But you could see where that one was going to pay off. He was going to be the new Tyreek Hill for that offense. Like, they were planning on utilizing him all over the field in every formation with every route, and then Mahomes took his own guy out. So,
yeah, but that same suspension that we're talking about next year was also looming large. We thought it could possibly happen last season, so that's probably why he dropped a little bit. Well, a lot of people were. I wasn't anticipating that because I knew that Goodell, with bigger cases like this, usually pushed it off until the end of the season. Yeah.
I wasn't expecting a suspension at all until the end of the season. but a lot of people were expecting it early. You're right.
I was just
Absolutely.
saying it was a possibility, and that's probably why you were able to
Right.
get him where you did. Because
Yeah,
I
I
know I
agree.
was a little wary on it.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. Um, Now I wish they would have suspended him knowing that he was gonna be out anyway. Um, Marvin Mims, yeah, because if he would have been suspended in week 4, he wouldn't have gotten hurt. So Marvin Mims had a few good games. As a wide receiver 5, for them to play at all, it's usually okay, but, I mean, he had a whole lot of games that were only 1, 2, or 3 points, and then got guys like you that are drafting future Hall of Famers at your wide receiver 5. So that's not it's not as it doesn't look as good, Mark. It doesn't look as good.
Yeah. Well, just go look at all my zeros, and you'll forget about it real quick.
But what does look good are my tight ends here. Travis Kelce, Brock Bowers, super big surprise there. And Rich, if you're still watching, I'm not saying Brock Bowers was a surprise as a good tight end, but nobody saw him as the tight end one. It looks like he might still be
I mean,
yeah, everyone whiffed on Labe, yeah. And then he says, "You were not the only one that made that." Yeah, I know. Matter of fact, I think, you and I both had some conversations before the season started, Rich, where we were hyping up the Labe train, and it didn't pan out. Of course, you're
Rich was
watching. I
big
should
on
have known
Mayer
better.
this year, right?
Yes, he was big on Mayer. I won a bathroom board bet with him because he was big on Mayer. Uh, but and I don't think that necessarily he was wrong about the situation there. I just think that Bowers was that much better than everybody thought he was going to be. Why are you going to use Mayer if you got you know
Yeah.
a perennial future Hall of Famer as a rookie tight end? But yeah, so that one was the one I won. So we each won one so far.
So
The last one,
quick
yeah,
on
go ahead.
Puka. Just quick on Puka. He finished
Yes.
26th overall at wide receiver. He was he was wide receiver number 3 on average fantasy points averaged on games played. So, yeah.
Yeah, and that was with 2 of the games being games he got hurt or
Yeah.
was playing hurt. So, like
So
in week
more than
9, he got.
justified being your number 1 wide receiver easily.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, for sure. I took him number 1 in a lot of leagues. I even took him number 1 in a, dynasty league. Um,
Last question on this division. Right now, you have to say yes or no. Is Kelsey playing next year?
no,
No. I
no.
think he does. I don't think he can go out the way he did.
Well, then you would think that he would have tried.
Yeah.
Like like, so the only reason I say no is because we do have the Taylor Swift factor, and I think if they're still together, he might be starting to think family, like, trying to get something going and, with his personal life, that sort of thing. But
I
also,
think
I wouldn't be surprised if he does play.
I think as soon as football's over, they're done within a year or 2.
Yeah, that's possible too, because she might realize
He gets
how
tired
arrogant
of
he
them.
is.
Yeah. I don't know. We'll see.
Can't predict him leaving the team for 3/4 of the season. I didn't realize he did that. Mayer left the team for 3/4 of the season. Wow.
Hmm.
I just thought that he just wasn't getting any attention. That's interesting. But that's why we have a Raiders guy in the house. All right. On the last one here, the last one went to our man Nate again. So the last divisions that we drafted was the AFC, NFC North. And Nate won that one, which means he won overall. So Mark and I each owe him $20. So we'll figure that out eventually, I'm sure. But a little unfair because he had the first overall pick in this one, and Lamar Jackson is in this one. And we somehow let him have Derrick Henry also. That was a hell of a combo to have this season. He also got Justin Jefferson. Like, this is unfair. Like, you and I are just idiots if we let him have all these great players. Caleb Williams outperformed what I expected him to do. I know you were a little bit higher on Caleb Williams than I was, but still not very high on him, just like Nate wasn't really. I think that was probably just one of the last quarterbacks taken. and he just got a surprise with them. He took your Chase Brown. That still surprises me that he got him because you were high on him.
That should be automatic disqualification. He loses. He stole him from me. The only reason he took him was because I was talking about him so much. I didn't expect to have to use my number 1 draft pick on Chase Brown. I figured I would be able to get him a little bit later.
And then you should be disqualified because you drafted the human predator. So that leaves me as the winner of that one. I like this. I like where we're going with this. Speaking of which, I'm sure you've seen in the news that we have a second human predator. We have the sequel, if you will, Justin Tucker.
Yes, I did see that. That's kind of crazy.
Yeah, he'll be a Browns kicker next year.
Makes you wonder how many more are out there, you know? Like, is this a widespread thing?
Yeah. DeAndre Swift. That was a pleasant surprise for Nate there as a RB3. He definitely performed well for him most weeks. Justin, like I said, Justin Jefferson is his wide receiver 1. His wide receiver 2 was a little bit of a letdown some weeks compared to what many of us thought we were going to get from him. That's DJ Moore. But he still had a few spike weeks that are good for best ball. Romeo Dubs, that was him trying to get as many Packers on this team as he could. He got 2. But Romeo Dubs, many people thought he was going to be more of the offense. I could see you trying to take a chance on any one of the Packer wide receivers to be the one that breaks out and does well and hope that they have one. Unfortunately, they did not have one specific one, especially if you ask Jacobs. But he had 4 double-digit games. So not great, but as a wide receiver 3, he didn't do horrible. Zay Flowers was a nice little piece to add there. As a wide receiver 4, especially, a lot of double-digit games. Amari Cooper was a letdown more than he was a help, but as a wide receiver 5, he did fine. So this is why Nate won. He did, for the position that they were at, they all stayed healthy and performed well enough for the position they were at. He was a little bit down at tight end, which is good for us to try to get caught back up. But even Tucker Kraft had some great weeks. Like Tucker Kraft as his tight end too. That was a steal. He way overperformed where people drafted him at. Cole Kmet underperformed where I thought he would go. So, yeah, not a bad team there, Nate. Mark, take it away.
Yeah, so I'm just looking at this real quick because I'm looking at my team and I'm like, how did I lose this? But yeah, it's the human predator. Like the quarterbacks in this division were so good. Nate had 767 points from his quarterbacks. My quarterbacks got 530. So that's a huge drop off right there because of the human predator, where Joe Burrow alone got 443 out of that. But like you talk about his running backs were great. He barely outdid me at running back with Josh Jacobs, Aaron Jones, and David Montgomery. My wide receivers, even with Christian Watson, outscored him quite significantly because, Jamar Chase was the number 1 wide receiver on the season. So, but again, keeping up that trend of Hall of Fame receivers with the wide receiver 5, your buddy, your friend, T. Higgins. He was pretty solid. He had a great season.
Yeah, for a wide receiver 5, sure. 7 games that were 0 or single digits. So that's that consistency though. But but I did admit he did a lot better than I expected. And depending on what team he ends up going to, if he has a great quarterback, I may go ahead and draft him as a wide receiver 3, maybe wide receiver 4. But going to another offense really scares me with him. Between him, dropping a lot of passes, like
what
teams.
If he stays in Cincy?
I'm not sure he will. I'm
What if
just
he
not
does?
sure he will. If he stays in Cincinnati, then I might take a chance on him as a wide receiver 3 on my teams.
2?
But I don't think I'll get him wide receiver 3. I don't think I'll get him because a lot of people will still take him as a wide receiver 2. I
Yeah.
can't trust him. Like it's too I want my top 2 to be guys that are going to give me 10 points week in and week out, double digits, no matter what, and then also have spike games. He will get you spike games and then also get you a lot of bust games or no points. Like I just can't trust it.
Yeah.
I won't do it. And like so I get the 30 points in week 5 and the 30 points in week 11 and the 20 points in week 15, 16 and the 40 points in week 17. Those weeks are weeks that he's winning you. But some of these zeros, we didn't know until right at game time that he wasn't playing because he's not really that hurt. I don't know if he just tries to preserve himself, but it's like he's always questionable. And then if they're playing Sunday night, it hurts you. If he's playing Monday night, it hurts you. It just seems like so many times when he's out, it hurts you in your lineups. And then he drops a wide open touchdown in week 14. And
Yeah.
that would have been a 10-point play, that 40-yard touchdown in week 14 that he dropped wide open in his hands. Like,
But I mean, I think we're nitpicking here because like anybody who misses time, it's going to hurt your team. So yes, when he misses time, does it hurt your team? Yes. We saw how many players throughout here that have missed time that have hurt our teams, hurt our score. When he's played, really, you have that 1 week, week 14, where he had 4 points. Week 3, which was his first game back when he didn't do anything in the preseason, right? So you could say Lil Russ there still getting healthy. And then every other week he played, he was more than a valuable starter for your team.
no, that's fair, but maybe it's a Bengal thing. Because what I'm getting at is the games where you think he's going to play, he was questionable. He was at practice all week, questionable at practice. You thought he was going to play. You had him kind of slotted in there in that flex position. And then you get to Sunday night and he's not playing. And now you got to go throw in some random running back or wide receiver at the last minute to swap him out. And maybe that's a Bengals thing. I don't know. But if he stays with the Bengals, that's still something I have to consider. Like,
Yeah.
Was he really that hurt that he couldn't play, or was it a business decision to sit him another week so that he could be healthier the next week? Like, or was it just all mind
But I'll tell
games
you
with
what,
the other team and he didn't really practice?
I'd much rather them sit a guy last minute. At least you can swap him in than have him go out there and play the decoy role that we've seen plenty guys do when they're injured. At least he's out where you can put somebody else in.
Yeah, I guess. I don't know.
Enough about T. Higgins. Let's talk about Luke Musgrave, where I wish I would have drafted Jelani Woods instead and just taken zeros across the board because he was freaking useless. Wow.
Yeah, that was
sure.
That was a letdown, but you did make up for it with David Njoku, who I whiffed on because I wasn't expecting Njoku to have a season at all. And as soon as the human predator went down, Njoku became a thing. So, I mean, there's something there. I mean, literally when the human predator went down, because he got hurt right here in week 7. And after that, dude just took off. So he was back to being David Njoku from a couple seasons ago. So, and Njoku's a guy I'm always down on, but I may not be so down on him next season.
Yeah.
I
think he's always been fine. It's just another one of those guys where can you trust to stay healthy or not? You know,
yeah.
Obviously.
Yeah, that's true.
Obviously, the first few weeks with the human predator, everybody sucked on that team while he was playing. But
yeah. So Nate beat you by 190 points, which sounds like a lot, but he beat me by about 280. So let's see where I went wrong. I had Jordan Love, obviously missed a couple games at the start of the season. Overall, had a decent season. Not QB1 worthy, but I mean, my QB2 had a QB1 worthy season, so it kind of made up for it. I had Jared Goff. Gibbs was a great addition to this team as my RB1. He even outperformed what I thought he would do in that offense. I was able to get Najee Harris late because a lot of people are always down on him, but he's always usually a pretty consistently an RB2 across the board. And if you look at most of these weeks where he had single-digit weeks, he still finished as a low-end RB2 because all the running backs did bad most of those weeks. And so, like, on the season, he ended up as a low-end RB2 as well, or a high-end RB3, I think, because he did have some bad games towards the end of the season here. But I know at least at this point, around week 13 or 14, he was still a low-end RB2 on the season. I was okay with that, getting him as late as I did. I took Nick Chubb really late just so that Nate couldn't get him. And I knew how big of a fan Nate is of his. And so I took Nick Chubb just pretty much because that's what you do with your buddies in drafts sometimes. You take Puka really high so that Mark can't get him, and you take Nick Chubb probably a round or two before Nate thought he was going to be able to get him, so he can't get him. That's what we do.
You take
now,
Chase Brown super early.
Yeah, like Nate did to you.
Yeah.
Pretty happy with the wide receiving core that I ended up with, though. So Jameson Williams, I knew I could wait in this division for wide receiver because there were a lot of deep ones. Like I said, Mark, you had a solid wide receiving core, and Nate had what most people would have thought was going to be a solid wide receiving core. So there were a lot of good wide receivers in this division. I took Jameson Williams as my number one wide receiver, and I do remember this draft because 5 of my last 6 picks were wide receivers. I remember that. I got all 5 of these guys in the last 6 rounds of this draft. Nick Chubb being the only other one I got late, and so Jameson Williams was my wide receiver 1. George Pickens was my wide receiver 2. I thought he was going to perform a little bit better than that, but I also thought that Justin Fields was going to keep the job. So obviously I don't exactly have my thumb down on that team. Jaden Reed outperformed what I thought he would. Even though I had him as my wide receiver 3, I still didn't really think he would perform even as good as he did. And so even had he scored fewer points than he did, I still would have been happy with the wide receiver 3 there. So, and then Jerry Jeudy, I expected him to get more like wide receiver 2 numbers. Turns out he was a lot better without the human predator as well, just like all of the targets out there. And he had some really good second half of the season. That is a dude that's probably going to be high on my draft boards next season. Just throwing that out there. If I'm in redraft leagues, I'm going to be targeting Jerry Jeudy earlier than consensus. See, and Rashad Bateman was a happy little surprise as a wide receiver 5. He had some solid weeks. He was definitely the clear-cut wide receiver 2 on that team. For the first time in Lamar's history, he has a clear-cut pecking order other than Mark Andrews. He has other guys on that team that he can finally throw to. So Bateman showed that he can be a wide receiver on that team. Not a super consistent one, though. I'm not saying go out and take him early in drafts, but Rashad Bateman as a late guy playing the matchups was a pretty smart play. And then, of course, Sam Laporta and Mark Andrews were letdowns for where I drafted them at. They were letdowns for where you drafted them at in your redraft leagues. Andrews had a little bit of a comeback, but by then many people had given up on him. Some people even dropped him. But you weren't starting him for a lot of the games in the middle of the season when he was starting to perform. Then you started him again, and he started to take a little dip back to 10, 12, 13 points, which isn't bad, but it was just that inconsistency. You don't want that from a tight end that you had to take as high as you did to get him. So I think that's probably where I got hurt the most. But I think really most of what hurt me was just your guys' teams being that much better and staying healthier for the most part. This one had some good teams in it.
Yeah. So if I remember correctly, you took Sam Laporta very early, and then immediately backed him up with Mark Andrews, because I remember you saying something like, I want to put the pressure on you guys at tight end. And
Yeah, I
make you
had the last pick. I had the third pick, and I took them with the first and second pick because I said I wanted to take the two best tight ends. A lot of it was I wanted to see what you guys would do because the other tight ends I felt in this division weren't that good or worthy of being drafted. So, and I mean, to an extent, I was right about that. Like, nobody had Njoku, Musgrave, Kraft, and Komet super high on their list. But at the same time, you guys also proved a point by getting Tucker Kraft and David Njoku later, and that it's also just the tight end position. Like if this were a regular fantasy league, you guys could have dropped any one of those guys and went and just picked up a random guy. You know what I mean? So but I only did it because it was best ball, and I knew that would give me an edge. Maybe at the end of the season, I still had an edge at tight end. I don't really know for sure. I think I did, but that edge at tight end, as you can see, still lost. I still lost by 280 points or whatever it was, 75 points.
Yeah.
Not super helpful.
So the two quarterbacks that didn't get drafted were Minnesota and Pittsburgh.
Sam Darnold. So Darnold and Fields / Russ.
When we did this, it was unsure on McCarthy didn't get hurt yet. He wasn't out for the season. And as you know, by the board bets I lost, I thought McCarthy was going to start halfway through the season. So I didn't want to go there. Where I messed up was taking Predator over Russell Wilson, because I told you I thought Russell was going to have the job, but I had to trust myself. I didn't trust myself. And on the risk of Fields taking any part of that job was what kept me away from there. But if I would have trusted myself, I wonder, I lost by what, 190 points? 180?
Yeah, sounds about right.
I wonder if Russell Wilson would have been enough to get it over that hump.
Yeah, and I lost a bathroom board bet on that one because I said that Fields was going to be a top 15 quarterback in passing yards per game in the games that he started and finished. So, if he played the full game, he was going to finish top 15. He ended up being 33rd in the games that he started and finished. So there were literally 32 other quarterbacks in the league. There was an entire league's worth of quarterbacks.
The whole league, yeah. The whole
league. After all these years of thinking that it was a Chicago Bears problem and not a Justin Fields problem, I'm finally ready to move on from Justin Fields.
It was an Ohio State problem.
I get it. You don't got to put salt in the wound.
Yeah. No. The one thing I was going to say that I come out of this with is you don't win your league with a draft. You have to manage it throughout the season. As you can see, we put the work in, we put the knowledge in, and we drafted the players we thought were going to be the best going into the season. But you can't predict injury. You can't predict three things that happen, and you got to manage your team well throughout the year. This just further cements that fact that the old adage, you can't win on draft day, but you can lose on draft day. So you have to manage, you have to put the work in throughout the season.
Absolutely. Well said. And for what it's worth, I've been in leagues too where it may not even necessarily be that you can lose on draft day either, because like a vampire league where you can only pick up the players that are on free agency after. And we saw that with our man David Genesis in the Powers League. He was the vampire. He could only pick up players. He only had enough for $1 per position in the auction draft to start the season. He had to pick up players throughout the season. And in that one, you didn't get to steal a player if you beat them like you do in most vampire leagues. So he literally had to just continue to work the free agent market, and he ended up making it to the championship. So, I mean, obviously there's some other crazy rules in the Fantasy Powers League as well, but ultimately what I'm saying is like I thought about challenging myself in a league and doing something like that, like purposefully drafting a bunch of scrubs just so I can try to use the free agency all season to battle myself back just for the extra challenge of it. Like I don't know how the rest of the league would take that, but I think it would be kind of fun to try something like that.
Yeah.
But also in my home leagues, I win a lot of championships, so I'm just looking for a way to challenge myself a little bit. And for those of you in my home leagues that watch, that was a shot. Hey, don't use the fingers. We might get flagged 15-yard penalty.
Oh yeah. I was just pointing first down. First down.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I need to get off here and go pick up my son from the airport here in a little bit. But we appreciate the people tuning in and watching. And we again, that's patreon.com/toylessandtitles. You can catch us on Blue Sky at toylessandtitles. You can catch Mark over on X at MT Simon, and our boy Nate at Nate_Dirt19 over on X as well, although he works a ton, so I'm not sure he's going to have time to check that very often. But get in our Discord. The Discord chat is free to join, and we talk about football year-round in the Discord. So if you've got Dynasty leagues, you got Dynasty trade thoughts or questions, all of that sort of good stuff, we can get you into the Discord. Just hit us up in the DMs for that information. But yeah, Mark, you have anything you want to add?
I don't think so. No.
Right on. Well, for Nate, for Mark, I'm Justin, and we're signing out.
Titles. We give fantasy football advice to get your crap team to the finals. From Nate's cousin Eddie persona and his unapologetic love for Chubb and Justin's hatred for Chris Ballard, our show is as good as a belly rub. Mark is the best of the NFC West, putting down Penguin Pete with his love for the Rams. Grab a whiskey or a beer, we're glad you're here. Welcome to the family.